the more we talk about it, the more we share our experiences, and the more they share what we did to overcome it, then people approach grief differently. So, whether it be books or conferences or social groups, we need to be talking about it so we can learn and improve rather than repeating the same pattern over and over and over again. That's how we're going to stay stuck as a society if we're not talking about it and we're not learning from it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to this edition of Interview from the Line.info. I'm your host, Jacob Reda, and today we'll be starting a series of interviews on discussing mental health issues. And to begin, we'll be talking about dealing with grief. And joining me in discussion today is Jason Clawson. He is a licensed therapist in the state of Utah, and he is the creator of the Hope Kit, which we will be talking about here in just a little while. But first, Jason, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today about the Hope Kit. It was a wonderful thing that I came across, and I'm glad that you took the time to be with us today to talk about it.
100%. It's an honor to be here and share about my journey and about my passion now.
Before we talk about the Hope Kit, let's talk a little bit about your background for a moment. You're a licensed therapist. How long have you been in the field, and what is your specialty?
So I've been in the field for 15 years as a mental health therapist, helping people in addiction, trauma, um, attachment issues, and grief. So those have been my specialties as my career has led me to helping those people in those spaces. And it's been a delight to sit in people's in the office and talk about those things that are holding them back from being their potential self. So it's great. Those are my specialties, and I love to help people.
I'm always curious to know what inspired this decision in your life to go down this path to this career and to help people in the way that you are.
So I always thought that I didn't go and go seek out therapy to be a therapist. I always felt like my journey has led me to become a therapist. Um, Early on, I was coaching and I was helping kids during difficult moments of their life, and they confided in me and they would ask me questions, and I was able to give them some advice. And then through a series of finding jobs, it led me to working at a residential treatment program called Heritage. And I again got that opportunity to make a difference in the lives of kids that have had difficult and challenging lives. And I felt like some of the advice and some of the connection I was building was meaningful. And I was going to work with purpose and excitement to be able to help people. So those events and a couple of other experiences led me to looking into helping people and looking into becoming a therapist, and I've loved it ever since.
let's let's dive right in and talk about the Hope Kit. What is it exactly, and how did you come up with the idea for it?
So the Hope Kit, as I have a traumatic event in my life where I lost my wife to stage 4 colon cancer. And as me and my boys were picking up the pieces from that experience, I was looking for things to help me in that grief space. And as a therapist that helps people, there wasn't a lot of resources out there. And I was frustrated that myself as a trained therapist and my two boys that were 11 and 5 couldn't find relief right away. So it inspired me to create a Hope Kit to give resources to help people through that process. And what really inspired it was we created a lemonade stand, me and my boys, because we wanted to find a way to give back to people that were also struggling. And my boys wanted to raise money so that we could put together these hope kits from a lemonade stand. And when the lemonade stand was done, we raised $1,500 and we began putting together these hope kits to deliver to people that were going through cancer, lost a loved one, mental illness. And we would go and show up at their house and deliver these kits to them. And we could sit in their grief, we could sit in their pain, and give them hugs and give them comfort and say life sucks. And it was so meaningful, and it made such a big difference to these people and to my boys, that I would leave saying, I think I found a purpose of helping people that I love and enjoy. And as I did these more and more, I thought I want to do this for the rest of my life because it was meaningful and purposeful work. So that's kind of it, that the that's how the Hope Kit came about. So we put together some resources and tools to be able to help in that grieving space. And there's a children's book that talks about um, always be with you to help that person. There's things in there that provide comfort, because when you're in that grief space, you just want to be hugged or you just want to eat something that gives you comfort. And then one of my favorite things that's in the Hope Kit is a deck of support cards. Many times people don't know what to say when someone dies. They'll say the wrong thing, oh, and then it will, and then they won't. They'll be so embarrassed that they won't come back and support you. So we created a deck of support cards, cue cards that tell you what to say and what to text to that person. And when you go through this, you get these decks of support cards and you hand them to your friends, and they're going to walk you and help you through that process. So this specific tool is meaningful for me because I felt so alone and so isolated from everybody else. Even though I had family and friends around me, I still felt lonely and um, depressed in my own home, where nobody's reaching out because nobody knew what to do or say. So this is a gift I wanted to give to people so they don't have to struggle like I did.
I was maybe you answered this already, but I want to ask just in case the psychology behind that initial support that you had, but then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but gradually, like you said, they weren't there anymore. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe why that is, and maybe expand on that feeling of loneliness that you experienced as a result of that?
Yeah, I think what happens is when you go through like a death, people rally around you, and then they bring you food, and they check in with you, and there's an influx of support that happens all the way up to the funeral. And it feels good, and people are there, and people come to the viewing and everything else. But what people don't really realize is once the funeral is over, that's when everybody disappears. Everybody goes back to their old life or what they were doing, but they don't forget or they forget and they don't know that the hardest moments are day one after the funeral. And that's where you go back to your empty house, you go back to the things you're doing, and that person, that void is missing. So you struggle. You feel all kinds of emotions. Your kids are struggling, and you feel more alone than you ever have before. And for anybody that's listening, please, please be there for people after the funeral, after the funeral, because that's where we need the help. That's where I need someone to just sit and not talk and just listen to me cry or just share my emotions. I need to get the yuck out and relieve the pressure that I'm feeling, and then I can move on. Because if I don't have anybody, it's like a pop bottle, that a 2 liter pop bottle that gets shaken and shaken, and the pressure builds, and I need an outlet. I need a way to let out that fizz through conversations, through activities, through um, being able to do some of my favorite things. And that releases some of the attention and some of the emotions that we hold on to those after those life altering events of our life.
Based on what you've seen and what your experiences are, do you believe that it's possible that maybe individuals have trivialized these experiences like funerals, and as a result of trivializing the experience, they also trivialize the emotions, and just maybe just like you said, like go through the motion of support, and then go back to, like you said, go back to their regular lives. Oh, I've got soccer, or I've got this, I've got that. Is there a possibility that that might actually be the case?
I agree. I think people do what they've always done. And you don't know what to do unless until you go through it yourself. Then you know how to support someone. But with people is they just follow what they've always done with funerals and with checking in with people, even to the point of saying, I'm sorry for your loss. Those trivialized things that we see in the movies or on TV, and we forget about the individual. We forget about the emotions that a person is handling. And I think we need to step back and observe what is actually going on rather than just get so caught up in what is taking place. We need to view like the experience that's happening. And then it allows us to make intentional decisions to help someone through that grief. We can observe that a person is going through emotions, but they're not talking about it. We can see that people are missing the people that we need to care for or the people that we need to take care of. So I think we just need to approach funerals and situations like that very intentional rather than just showing up and just going through the emotions.
What were you hoping to achieve with the Hope Kit?
Again, it was we created that lemonade stand, and I was just hoping to help two families. And I think as a father that stepped into this grief space with my two boys, I wanted to show them how to grieve, um, and showing them when you go through a hard moment of life, we can still do good and we can still give back. So a perfect opportunity is raise money, connect with people selling lemonade, and then put these together with my boys, and then finding people that we can help. And it became, I wanted us to focus more on other people than ourselves so that we could heal through the emotion by serving and giving other people. It in a sense, it gave us an emotional timeout by helping another person. So it gave us a break. It gave us a chance to breathe and to feel different than constantly thinking about, oh my gosh, my wife's not here. Oh my gosh, this is so hard. Oh my gosh, I feel so alone. But and I needed a way to turn that off for me and also my boys. And I think by doing this, we begin to smile and laugh more with those families. And then when we came back home, we created a memory that was lasting for us. Because before our we were operating on sad and lonely memories that were replaying in our head and we couldn't get it out. And the more we thought about it, replaying it, the psychology is our body's going to respond. and and we needed a break from that so that we could start our grieving and we could start moving in a direction of being happier.
Since the moment you started the kit until now, how have you seen its reach grow?
That's a great question. Um, initially it was we put it on Facebook when we raised the money and we created 25 hope kits. Initially, we were getting people here in Utah that were reaching out and saying, "Hey, I want a box, or my friend needs one." So initially, it was within maybe 30 miles, and then doing this, a lady reached out to me from Virginia, and she said, "Hey, I love what you're doing. I'm struggling. Can I get a hope kit?" And I'm thinking, I she's in Virginia. What do we do? So me and my boys, we designed a box that we would put the hope kits in the box, and then we sent it out to this lady. And this it meant so much to this lady that we were able to make a difference in another state. And then shortly after that, my son comes to me and says, "Dad, we need to help more people." And I was like, "When do I have time?" He goes, "I want to have a goal for us to help at least one person in all the United States, all the states." And I was thinking, man, I really don't have time for this, but I didn't want to squish what my boys was thinking. So I just said, okay, let's do it. So we went on this mission of finding people in different states and sending them a hope kit. And people came out of the woodwork. Hey, I know someone in California. I know someone in Florida. I know this. And we began to send these out all across the country. And last year, we delivered to Delaware, which was the 50th state. We delivered 50 boxes in 50 states, and we completed our goal as a family to be able to help so many people. And for me, I was thinking people that people didn't know my wife, but they do know my wife because of what we did. And my wife continues to live in our lives because we continue to share hope kits that will bring people hope and happiness to all around the world. And now we're in all 50 states. We have one in Australia, we have one in Canada, we have one in the UK. So our influence continues to build because people want hope and people want to find a way to bring happiness to people that are suffering.
What impact have you seen the Hope Kit have on people?
One example that stands out is we delivered to a lady in, I think it was Michigan, and she was struggling, and we sent it to her, and she was so grateful that she got the Hope Kit. Um, but one of our missions was once you get a Hope Kit, you fill it back up and then you pay it forward. Um, about a month ago, I got an email from a lady, and she says, "I want to reach out because I want to thank you for inspiring me. I've been through a tough, difficult events in my life, but your story has inspired me to make these bags and go deliver them to people that were struggling." And she goes, "Today, since I got my Hope Kit, I've been able to deliver 500 of these bags to people that were suffering." And as I read this email, I'm just crying because I was just doing what I felt. I was just doing what I felt in my heart was the right thing to do. And that's pick up the pieces and help people, especially when you're going through the hard moment. And that is medicine for me and my boys. And to see a lady take it and continue to give back, it just makes me so happy and so grateful that I chose to do what I did and choose to grieve the way I did.
How has the creation of the Hope Kit impacted your life?
It's a great question. um, I think the way I look at it is, again, I was just doing what I thought in my heart was the right thing to do, and that's showing my boys how to live after hardship and difficulty. But as I seen the influence, the impact that it's having, and the people that reach out and say, "Thank you for inspiring me. What you're doing is amazing." I'm just in awe. And now the way I look at people, the way I talk to people, the way I am intentional about my actions are so different now because of this experience. Um, I truly feel blessed to be able to do this, and I see people for who they can become, and not for their circumstances that they're currently going through or what they've been through. I see people for who they are, and it's such an amazing experience to see people's hearts and to see who they are, because then I get to have these real authentic conversations with them, and we could to connect emotional to emotional, and it brings us so much closer together. And it has changed me of who I can become and who I want to continue to become.
So let's talk a little bit about the reality of grief. I mean, we've covered a little bit. I mean, we have covered it. Because again, the purpose of the Hope Kit is directly related to grief, and grief occurs under different circumstances, but all of it is associated with loss. Now, whether it's the loss of a loved one, or you can experience grief through the loss of a job or a relationship, and all of that can impact a person in real and unfortunately sometimes detrimental ways. In your experience, how have you seen people deal with their grief, and what impact did you see grief have on their life?
I th- People approach grief so differently, and it's based on their experience. And most of the time, they don't have a lot of experience, so they just kind of either put on a mask, hold in the emotions, isolate, um, try to like, and the way that I describe grief, it's kind of like it's this hole that's missing. This hole out of our life that has been taken out of our life, whether it's an accident or a or an illness. It's this hole, and what people try to do is they try to fill up this hole so life can resume in a normal process. Like nothing ever happened. But the problem with people is they're trying to mask those emotions or cover it up, so they do it with like either substance or relationships or eating or social media or exercise. They just fill this up without feeling the emotions that they're experiencing, because if they can feel it, then feel the emotions and let it go. If they can do that, they will grieve and heal properly. um, that's the hard part. And also what I teach people is the opposite of grief is connection. And this just blew my mind when I made this connection, because when we lose someone, a thing, we disconnect from that person, place, or thing. Disconnect from my wife because she's not there. Disconnect from my job and my associations, my connections, my routine that I feel safety in. Disconnect as I move away from a place where I feel comfort, and there's no more connection with that person or place. And the best medicine is that connection piece. We need to find, not replacing, but sometimes we have to create a new connection that brings us purpose and meaning in our life. And when we can do that, that normalcy goes back to where it was to some degree. Um, and I think by doing this, we can still honor that person, or we can still honor that thing, because we're still living our life and moving forward.
People want to live well and happy, but that is not always possible, no matter how happy or think good thoughts or distracted people wish they could be from anything that isn't constant happiness. Um, how might ignoring sadness or grief affect a person's mental health in the long term?
Think of a 2 liter pop bottle. You go through an experience and it shakes up and it builds pressure and there's tension and it's always there. And I think a lot of us will say, well, it'll go away. And ignoring it doesn't necessarily mean it disappears. There it still remains there. And I think with grief, if we ignore it or if we like brace for those hard days, we still don't heal from it. So we need to find a way to let out those fizz of the 2 liter pop bottle and we need to find outlets, healthy outlets to be able to release this tension. One, I'll give you an example of this is with my 6 year old, he was struggling. And the way that he was responding to grief was he was explosive and angry and yelling and he didn't know how to release this emotion and um, so what I did on a whim is I was like, I'm just going to go to Hobby Lobby and I'm going to get some painting supplies, some canvases, um, and go home and have them paint how they're feeling because I was trying not to therapize them or try to ask them therapy questions because they didn't want to hear it. But what I did is I just gave them the supplies and I said, paint what it's like to what it's like to be you in a day. Like how is it inside? And I just sat back and he was able to express those emotions and release some of that tension and I could get my son. I could understand him. It made sense why he was acting the way he was, and I could approach him differently because I knew where he was coming from. So again, if we ignore those, it's gonna it's gonna explode or it's gonna come out, and we're not gonna have any control when it comes out. If we let out the fizz, we have control of enough or just a little bit. I'm like, okay, that's enough. We can control that and it will be such a better experience.
So let's talk about some of the misconceptions that that people have, or maybe our society produces with regards to fear. I mean, to grief. What are some of those misconceptions, or what are the misperceptions that you have encountered regarding grief, or how to deal with it?
I think a misconception is people want you, um, people are afraid to, the misconceptions are, I'm afraid to say the person's name that passed away. And people are afraid, like, if I say it, it's going to rock the boat, it's going to ruin the relationship. No, we want you to say their name over and over and over again because it helps them keep that spirit and that memory alive. And we get to celebrate their life every time we hear their name. So I think that's a misconception that people need to hear about. And then also is being able to, you don't necessarily need to say the right thing. I think, but you probably need to do the right thing. And what I mean is, you don't necessarily need to come over and tell me how to solve my problems, but just sit with me in my emotion and just listen to me. And that can speak volumes and volumes and volumes to be able to help the person. So don't think you have to say the right thing, but you probably need to figure out how to do the right thing. And I think what is important here, let me give you an example about that. There's a guy that I worked with, and his dad passed away. So his mom had 3 kids. There was a neighbor. Um, this is an example of doing the right thing. Once a week, he'd come over and grab the kids, and he would take them to go get ice cream. What this allowed the mom to do is she would take a hot bath by herself and relax. And that was so healing and helpful for the mom. Again, that's an example of doing the right thing and having the the insight to say, this might be really good. So I'm going to take the kids, take them for ice cream, give mom a break for a day. So being able to do the right thing. Another example is if you don't know what to do, think about someone that's grieving. They probably need paper products, paper plates, and cups. Just go buy them, go deliver them. Hey, I know you're going to need these because dishes suck, so here you go. That again, that's doing the right thing rather than trying to do something that just doesn't feel natural or uncomfortable. And that's what I mean by that.
Now, we live in times that are more electronically and technologically influenced. I think we maybe covered this a little bit. But I'd like to ask you, how have you seen things like social media affect how people perceive or even experience grief?
What, and this is my observation is what I see is there's support groups that are out there, but what I find is a lot of people want to stay sad. They get stuck in being the victim and talking about those sad things and not being able to find the right place to share their grief. And that's really hard. And what happens is people, misery loves company. So they get in these groups and they stay sad together. And I think what we need to do is need to be able to lean into the discomfort, but also make some necessary steps to find outlets and healthy ways of releasing those emotions. Because that is going to help us not remain stuck. It's going to help us progress through the process. And it's really easy to get in those groups, but we need to say, am I how am I doing today? Am I making progress? And progress can mean, hey, I went to church for 10 minutes. That was awesome. Hey, I went to work for an hour. But we need to constantly making steps forward rather than being stuck with social media. And again, social media can be a negative place where people just want to vent or talk about negative things. And if in our Facebook group is if there's a bunch of those, it's going to trigger our loneliness, and it's going to activate some emotions that we're not ready to deal with. So something to do and try is maybe let's detox our social media. Say, are these people posting happy, uplifting things, or are they always negative and doomful? That's not helping your grief. So bring someone in, help you filter those people so that when you're going through social media, all you're seeing is positive and uplifting stuff. And it can be so liberating and healing.
How has the perception of grief changed over time?
I think, I mean, people are talking about it more. People are more open and their experiences become, I guess, platforms to be able to talk about it. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we share our experiences, and the more they share what we did to overcome it, then people approach grief differently. So, whether it be books or conferences or social groups, we need to be talking about it so we can learn and improve rather than repeating the same pattern over and over and over again. That's how we're going to stay stuck as a society if we're not talking about it and we're not learning from it. I'll give you an example. So, I have a neighbor that's a social worker, training and helping people. Um, and then we had a neighbor that the mom the wife's husband committed or died from suicide, and she didn't know what to do to help. But she goes, "Huh, I know Jason has been through it." She came over, she talked to me. What can I do? How can I help? How do I support them? And she learned from our experiences, and then she took it and she helped that person, and she was more confident in knowing what they need. I think we need to do more of that, is not being afraid to say, how do I help you, or learn from someone else's experiences so you're not repeating the same thing that everybody else is doing.
In 2019, the Journal of Behavioral Medicine published a study that looked at physical effects of grief on individuals. And the researchers in that study looked at other research that found increased rates of illness and death in individuals who were experiencing extreme or unchecked grief. What have you encountered with regards to this, and what are some of the known physical effects of a person experiencing grief that could adversely impact their health?
And let me give you a analogy. Think of someone carrying a backpack, and think about those rocks of grief and emotions. Those rocks of emotions are in your backpack. And think about carrying around a bag of rocks for a year or 2 years. Obviously, you're going to have some physical impacts on your body, whether it be like physical pain, whether it be emotional pain. It's going to take a toll on your body because whether it be physical or emotion, it weighs on you just as heavy. And I have seen that from physical pain. I've seen that from illnesses coming on stronger because they're not dealing with the emotional stuff. So it impacts the way you function physically, and it continues to wear on your body. So emotional is, and again, going back to the backpack, we need to take out those rocks. We need to talk to someone, let out the fizz so it doesn't weigh us down, and other parts of our life are impacted.
And we've talked a lot about grief and covered the Hope Kit. For people who want the Hope Kit, how can they get a hold of it?
Go to our website, hopekit.com, and you can find um, those resources available to either buy for yourself, or you can send it to someone that uh, is struggling. And probably someone after the funeral is the best time to send this to them, and then you can be the best support for them. I always say flowers are great and food is great, but guess what? You end up throwing away at the end of the day, and it reminds you of that death and and that sadness. But with a Hope Kit, it's lasting support. They'll last for a year, 2 years, long after that. Especially if you use the cards and build a team, this is going to be something that lasts forever. So go to our website and you can get connected. There's a tab in there with articles that I've written about grief that you can read and get some understanding and some education.
What do you see as the future of the for the Hope Kit?
Well, right now we are we we've are in talks with a website called legacy.com, and they're one of the biggest websites where they work with funeral homes all across America. And we're hoping to be able to help more people in that space and to be able to provide more of those Hope Kits to people that need, and so that they can start to do grief differently. And that's what I hope for. Is I don't want people to go through what I went through. I don't want the loneliness, the fear, the scaredness. I want resources available to help people heal. Because if they heal and they get unstuck sooner, then they can help more people, or they can pay it forward, and we can help uh, other situations and problems that are happening rather than staying stuck for grief year after year after year. There's so much things to do and so many people to help, and I want this to be a vehicle that drives people to paying it forward and give it back to other people.
To sum it up, is there anything else that you want to mention or talk about, whether it's about the Hope Kit or grief that was not mentioned that maybe you would like to discuss or mention to the viewers?
Again, I just go emphasis back to that. The opposite of grief is connection. A lot of people probably don't have the support that I did, but start small. You can start with your neighbor, you can start with your coworker, you can start with a therapist, and start there. Start somewhere with opening up and sharing your emotions with someone rather than trying to hold it on and try to do it by yourself. It's too hard and painful. And start with what you're comfortable with. um, and taking off that mask just temporarily will allow you to make some steps in the right direction to heal.
All right, Jason, thank you very much for taking the time to share your story today and for introducing the Hope Kit to everyone.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You're welcome, sir. And that will do it for this edition of the interview from the line.info. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more, be sure to like it and subscribe to this channel. And also be sure to follow the line.info on social media. Until next time, take care.